for having me. Glad to be here. Just to add to my background, I was a paramedic for 35 years. Well, in the very beginning, I wasn't a paramedic. I was an ambulance attendant, but did my critical care flight paramedic training in 1989. And so essentially was in EMS for 35 years. I've been taught paramedics for 20 years at the critical care level and at the advanced care paramedic level. Advanced care paramedic in Canada is equivalent more or less in terms of scope of practice to the EMTP in the US. And I'm assuming most of the audience is from the US, maybe other parts of the world. But so that's my background. In the end of 2018, I had an MI. I had a proximal occlusion, my LAD, you'll know what I'm talking about, and had a stent put in. And at that point, I retired from paramedicine. I was doing it part-time at that time. I thought about going back to the road, but my wife said to me, well, you can risk dying while you're on duty, or I can kill you with my bare hands. Which would you prefer? So I decided to step away, which has been nice. I've had my weekends off. And the way I end up in the current position that I'm in, I introduced virtual reality into our paramedic lab. I did my master's sort of late in life and did some papers on virtual and augmented reality and found it quite fascinating. Virtual reality in particular, because it's the only medium that I'm aware of where students can learn in the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains. It's experiential learning, it's immersive, it's quite compelling. And at Georgia, we're exploring both virtual and augmented reality, but primarily virtual reality. But anyway, I introduced VR to our paramedic program. There was a mass casualty incident triage program that we looked at. And after I did that, that led to a conversation with our senior management team. And as you know, if you teach at a college or university, most new technologies don't get funding or human resources attached to them until they reach a threshold level of interest. And I tried to make the case that I felt this really needed investment to help it reach a threshold level of interest. And to my surprise, they agreed. And a week later, they said they were going to create a position. They posted it, asked me to apply for it, and I did, of course. And so I've been in the position for 2 years. And we've been quite fortunate. I took a very different approach from most colleges and universities. Most schools typically harness the talents of their XR development students. When I say XR, I'm referring to virtual, mixed, and augmented reality. And I'm happy to define those more clearly at the end if you like. But I'm sure you all know what virtual reality is. It's a headset, that's puts you in a completely different world, an immersive experience. But anyway, they created this position. It was a temporary position. I took it, and a year and a half into it, it was a 2-year secondment. A year and a half into it, I said, I really need some assistance, some staff. And so they created a full-time position, immersive technology manager, which I now occupy. As I was saying, most schools just develop a little XR program, a little VR program. They test it out. Maybe they do some research around it, and then it typically ends up in a VR lab and maybe does or does not get integrated into curriculum. My approach was I really wanted to get virtual reality into the hands of as many teachers and students as possible. So I convinced our senior management team to allow me to create a whole series of pilots. So typically cohorts of 10 to 25 students. Our architectural technology program had been using VR for about 5 years. It's solidly integrated into curriculum. The first pilot was Indigenous Studies, language learning, and they used virtual reality. And it went from pilot to full integration into curriculum after the first semester because it's context. It's like a field trip every week. The students, for example, have a course called Language in the Home where they actually go into a house every week and meet there for about a half an hour every Thursday. We're doing virtual reality in our biotech degree, nursing degree, paramedic program, advanced care paramedic program, occupational therapy and physiotherapy assistant program, massage therapy, acupuncture, events management, tourism, trades sort of broadly, marine engineering, power engineering, and now we're looking at maritime navigation, which is where students learn how to pilot the big tanker ships or cruise ships. So about 16 programs, 300 headsets, close to 100 of them are deployed for VR for distance learning. The others are in labs. We have one small lab at our main campus. We have 7 campuses total, and I'm building 4 more labs that'll be opening this September. So it's been a whirlwind, and people sometimes ask me, well, how did you do all this? And I had to think about that. And when I thought about it, I thought, it's probably because I have a paramedic background. I'm very, as a paramedic, I'm very impatient. I like to make things happen quickly, and I like to see results quickly, right? You know what I'm talking about. If you're a nurse or a paramedic, we like to make things happen. So I attribute it to that. So let me just put this in slide mode here. So yeah, so, oh, what's happening here? My slides are transitioning without my even doing anything. Anyway, so I gave a talk about immersive learning about a year ago as a NAMC webinar, and this time I thought I'd talk about the metaverse. And maybe you can put the poll up, Rio, right now to ask people if they know what the metaverse is. And I'm sorry that's a question with a dangling participle. It'll probably drive you nuts, but I'm going to put my glasses on to see the results here. All right. I love this poll function. It's so amazing. It really is. So looks like we've got 17 of 28 who've responded so far, a 60% participant rate, and that's probably pretty reflective of the entire group. So we'll just, we're at 20 to 28. So we'll go with that. But anyway, so interesting, about 30% know what the metaverse is. Good, cool. About 50% sort of know what it is. I think the whole world is probably in the category of sort of knows what it is. There's so many different opinions of what the metaverse is, and then 20% say no. So that's great. Let me just share those results with you so you can see them. So you know what virtual reality is? It's you wear a headset like the Oculus Quest headset from Facebook, for example, or from Meta. And when you're in it, you're completely immersed in another world. You look up, you look down, you look left, you look right, you look all the way around, and you can't see the real world. All you're seeing is this fantasy world, this digital world. And the digital world could be, the side of a highway at a traffic collision, or it could be in a hospital room, or it could be anywhere you can possibly imagine. It could be a fantasy world. And so it's very immersive. And I found immersion was critically important for learning, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But what is the metaverse? Essentially, the metaverse is most experts agree that it is going to be the internet in 3D. So one way to access the internet will be in 3D, either using VR glasses or augmented reality glasses. So VR glasses excludes the real world. Augmented reality, you're part of the real world with images and 3D objects superimposed within the real world. And augmented reality glasses are not really available at the consumer level yet. And I'm a little skeptical about its value as a learning tool, but I'm starting to see some applications. And I'm particularly intrigued by the concept of immersive augmented reality, which is not a term that actually exists, but I'm going to use it anyway. And that's where you've got virtual reality glasses, but you've got cameras that point outwards, and they call that pass-through. You can see the real world, and with that, you can actually alter the real world. So this office here could become a hospital room, and the tables, would look like hospital beds. And that's pretty intriguing to me. But the metaverse is going to be the internet in 3D, and it'll be immersive mostly. It'll be interactive mostly. It'll be persistent, and it really requires minimum 5G, probably 6G to function properly. And you'll be able to access it with VR or AR. But I think I see the difference between VR and AR is virtual reality. You're in the metaverse. You're in that space, and with augmented reality, you're just sort of looking into it. peering into it. You know, much like, you know, those construction sites where you walk along the sidewalk and they have boards on the walls and they have little windows you can look in to see the construction site. Well, virtual reality, you're in the construction site doing the construction work. Augmented reality, you're peering through one of those windows to see, you know, what they're doing, the progress they're making. So the metaverse is going to be interesting, but you know, they're broadly sort of two types of motion in virtual reality. One is room scale, where you wear a headset, but you're physically walking around, and that's typically in a 10 by 10 foot space. And if you need to go further, you press a button and teleport, you just sort of hop there. And the other way to move around, which is what the metaverse will be mostly, is you're in avatar form, you're sitting in a chair and you're pushing a joystick to move your avatar forward. And this is a bit of a problem because in social VR spaces in the metaverse, mostly when your avatar moves, but your body doesn't, that conflict between what your vestibular system is experiencing and what your eyes are seeing gives people motion sickness, at least 15 to 20% of the population. Now, there are ways to mitigate motion sickness, there are ways to acclimatize to it, but you know, I think when we talk about EMS education in the metaverse, we'll want to make it room scale. We'll want to be walking around in a space, and that can be 10 by 10 or 30 by 30 or 50 by 50, whatever we want essentially. But the way the metaverse will work is it's going to be a social place, mostly social, but in the metaverse, you'll be able to go places, travel anywhere in the world. You'll be able to buy things. You'll be able to sell things. You'll be able to do presentations. You'll be able to go to events like, you know, a concert or a ballet or a play. You know, currently in some virtual worlds like VRchat, deaf communities are meeting and they have headsets that have hand tracking so they can actually sign to one another. So they're meeting other deaf people from around the world. There are theater groups that wear sensors on their elbows and knees and ankles, and they can do theater or they can dance, and they've got full body tracking in the internet, and we'll have the same thing in the metaverse. So there's a lot of hype around the metaverse right now, and to the point actually where it's quite annoying. And I'm tired of hearing the term the metaverse, but of course, enterprise is really excited about it because it's another, you know, marketplace for them. But so I'm gonna come back to the metaverse at the very end, but in the interim, I want to talk about the kinds of virtual reality experiences that are available for EMS training now. And it's still early days, and we have a long way to go. But I think it's important for us as educators to get involved or get familiarized with virtual reality so we can begin to understand it. Does it have any pedagogical value? Is it really experiential learning? Can you learn skills in virtual reality? And I'll give you some examples of, I'm going to drop some names and give you some examples of some virtual simulation applications that are being used currently in medical training. And they all have certain strengths and weaknesses. And ultimately, these applications will become part of the metaverse. They'll become either web-based or there'll be, you know, portals between these different worlds, so you can do training in one and then go to another. And it's nobody knows for sure, right? So those of you who answered, you think you know what it is. You know, I think I'm in that category too. I mean, and I have my opinions about it as well. But I'll tell you one thing that VR should not do, and that is replicate the classroom. I love Dolores Umbridge. Actually, I hate her, but I love her because I hate her. She's like the worst possible educator. And one of the things I see in virtual reality happening sometimes is some companies are creating digital twins. So twins of buildings, twins of different things, historical landmarks, which is super cool. But one of the things one of the mistakes I think people make when they start world building in virtual reality is they'll replicate the classroom, for example. And who the hell wants to go to a classroom in virtual reality? Like if you're learning Greek history, why not do it while sitting on the steps of the Parthenon? Like, why would you go into a theater type classroom and look at something on a screen? It just makes no sense. I mean, education should be experiential. You should have agency and be able to do things with your hands. You should be able to have one-on-one discussions with classmates and teachers and things like that. It shouldn't be a lecture place. In fact, I really enjoy doing these events, but the quickest way to anesthetize your audience is to give a lecture and put everyone on mute, which is what we do. And there are lots and lots of events in virtual reality where they give lectures and put everyone on mute, which drives me crazy. And there's some interesting events, don't get me wrong. But the best part about those events is not so much when someone's up there lecturing and sharing their knowledge, it's at the end of the lecture when everyone can just mill around and network. I mean, you know what it's like when you go to an M.E.T conference. Some of the best learning happens when you're chatting with other educators and you find out what they're doing and you learn from them and they learn from you. And they may be doing something that's okay, but it gives you this brilliant idea to do something even better. It's a networking part that's really valuable. So let's look at, one of the interesting things about virtual reality is, as I mentioned, is you can learn in the cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domains. And I'm going to focus mostly on the cognitive and psychomotor domains, but there are lots of applications for soft skills, for cultural debiasing, for experiencing what it's like to be on the autism spectrum, for interview skills, for conflict resolution skills, for de-escalation in a mental health crisis. It's incredible, but I can't possibly talk about all those things in an hour. So let's talk about some other things. So we're doing virtual reality anatomy on a really large scale, and I've muted the audio intentionally here. We're doing it in about, we're studying and doing research in about 8 different programs to look at the efficacy of learning in virtual reality compared to learning in 2D. And we're also trying to get a sense from students whether they enjoy it, they find it engaging and that sort of thing. And it's pretty incredible when you step into this virtual lab and you have a life-size anatomical model in front of you and you can walk around it and you can pick anatomical objects off and see them labeled, and you can actually even stick your head right inside some of them. And there are also some microscopic examples, some physiology examples, well, not so much, well, just joint movements, those sorts of things, and hearts contracting, and you can enlarge parts of the body and shrink them down and rotate them. And a couple of interesting things that students have said about their experience in these life sciences labs, where they're in there with their classmates and a teacher, is one student said, it's the first hands-on experience I've had since the pandemic, which is really a great point. And another student said she didn't really quite understand the axes of the body, but as soon as she went into a 3D world, she totally understood the axes. So that was quite interesting. So we're also using a program called BodyMap. So 3D Organon is one of BodyMap. BodyMap has the best life sciences lab I've ever seen. It's beautiful. It'll hold far more students than any other program. That was a heart. Now you can't tell, but my avatar is smaller than the heart. The heart is actually, I enlarged it to about 8 feet tall. And you can actually step into the ventricle, look up at the AV valves opening and closing, and you almost feel like you can reach out and pull on the papillary muscles and the chordae tendineae. It's really quite something. And the fact that you can get so many students in there simultaneously is pretty incredible. So it's a spatial experience, right? Like the analogy I use is our architectural technology students design buildings in 2D, and then then they see it in 3D. And in 3D, you get a very different perspective. Suddenly when you're in 3D, you realize, oh, this ceiling should be elevated another 2 feet, and this hallway is much too wide. Let's narrow it down. And this spiral staircase doesn't belong here, but we need to put it in a place that's aesthetically pleasing, but also doesn't affect the structural integrity of the building. So two things in virtual reality. One is that spatial experience, and the other is what people call infinite scalability. So you can take a molecule, an atom, and enlarge it to as big as you want. Typically, the size of a football is about a good size. And there's a product, for example, called Nano, where People in microbiology and the pharmaceutical industry from all over the world are meeting in Nanome and collaborating. And in fact, some of the work done on the research on the SARS-CoV-2 virus and development of mRNA vaccines happened in Nano. It's really quite an amazing program. And if you have an Oculus Quest 2 headset, you can download a free version of it and check it out. So that's anatomy. Anatomy is big. We are looking to so we have 5,000 anatomy and physiology students every year across 7 campuses. And I've been having talks with the senior management team in the registrar's office about giving students the option to choose a face-to-face class or an online class and to enter a section with virtual reality if they choose, or they can do 2D because I think it's going to be so powerful. Just looking at my watch here to try to keep me on time. This is a product called SimX. We use this in our nursing program, and they have a suite of EMS scenarios as well. Some key features that are really good. It's a multiplayer system for patient assessment, and there's a moderator, so a nurse or a paramedic or an EMS instructor moderator. And, you know, the ideal number of people in there is 2 students in there assessing and treating the patient, and maybe some others as observers. And what's great about this is that, well, a few things. The students have agency, so they can take a stethoscope, listen to the lungs, identify abnormal lung sounds. They can grab a blood pressure cuff, put it on the arm, grab a pulse oximeter, put it on the finger of the opposite arm, reach down, feel a pulse at the wrist, which is just a vibration of the controller. And even though the tactile component is crude, it's not quite there, the illusion of doing those things is very powerful and very valuable, because students learn how to assess the patient in the sequence you want them to assess them. You know, for example, I like my students to put the pulse oximeter on before they give oxygen. It just makes sense to get a baseline oximetry reading. And they can practice all those things in sequence. So the moderator, the student actually talks to the patient. The moderator chooses from pre-recorded voices. And they now have an option where the instructor can be the voice of the patient if the student asks a really clever question that's not part of the pre-recorded questions. The analytics at the end of the program, and the analytics are really critically important. The analytics gives the student and the teacher information on everything that was done, the sequence in which it was done. Did the student give the right drug at the right time to the right patient by the right route? Did they ensure no contraindications, no allergies, etc.? You know, the 5, 7, 9 rights, whatever rights you go by, and that's invaluable. In our nursing program, the nurse faculty was saying that the students love it because it's contextual. They feel like, unlike a lab where they're dealing with the same looking mannequins day in, day out, in VR, they feel like they're looking at a sick patient and talking to the patient's brother, husband, wife, sister, etc., trying to calm them down, reassure them. And so, you know, you interact with the patient like you normally would, and you're in a hospital environment. And that context is really valuable for reinforcing learning. The faculty member said it's the easiest way to check off competencies for lab that she's ever done before, because it's all recorded, which is really quite incredible. So SimX is just one platform. It happens to be the one we're using. I like it. Well, back in 2016 or 17, I met with one of the co-founders. He's an ER doc in LA, and he was in VR in LA. I was in my basement in Barrie, Ontario, which is an hour north of Toronto, and he ran me through a series of scenarios. One of which was fun because it was high altitude pulmonary edema, and I was a flight paramedic for 10 years. So I was able to identify it quickly. And the interesting thing about the scenario was not so much making the diagnosis, but me as the medic asserting to the commanding officer that this soldier could not continue the mission. And I've never been in the military, so the doc who put me through it asked me if I'd been in the military, and I said no. But you know, EMS training is I wouldn't say similar in any way, shape, or form, but we're just used to sort of commanding the scene and not putting up with any crap from anyone. So anyway, it was very cool. A catechist, this one I quite like. It's been a PCVR experience, and I think that was somebody. Some of you may know that guy. I think that was Bill Balow. He's a paramedic who uses a catechist quite a bit to teach his students. He's probably one of the leading experts in this particular platform. This is a multiplayer platform. It's kind of a mentorship platform. And by the way, both SimX and the catechist can be done on PC or VR. And I think the way Bill does it, if I'm not mistaken, Bill, if you're on the call, you can correct me, but I think the way he does it with his students is maybe that's not Bill Balow, I'm not sure, but he goes into VR and does case-based learning with his students. His students are on a PC, and it's basically he asks his students, "What do you want me to do next?" And they guide him through it, which is really cool. It's 3D for them, even though it's PC. And a catechist has lots of EMS type scenarios. They also have a multi-casualty incident, so you can do triage in there. It's the only one I know that has multiple scenarios that include mass casualty incidents. So it's quite cool. The next one is VRpatients, and this one is almost exclusively EMS oriented. They do have nursing scenarios. One of the things I love about this program is at the back end, you can make your own scenarios, which is really amazing. And other programs lack that ability, except for one I'll talk about in a second. But what I don't like about this program is that it has drop-down lists for assessment and treatment. And there's very limited agency. You can take a stethoscope and listen to the chest, and that's really important. But you can't put a blood pressure cuff on or put a pulse oximeter on, or take these things out of the monitor kit, etc. Agency in my mind is so important, because that's how you get embodied cognition. That's how you really put learning on steroids. And but I love the staff at VRpatient. They're very receptive. They're improving the program all the time. I'd say every couple of months they've made some new improvement. For trauma, it's cool. You can drag and drop all sorts of injuries, whatever you want, onto the avatars and modify them. And I don't know of any other program that does that. So it's a program to try and one to watch, and it's available on PC or VR, and it works on a standalone VR headset too. So I've got my eye on them, and probably going to adopt them as soon as they get rid of the drop-down lists. But that's just my personal preference. If you don't mind drop-down lists, you might imagine this. This is someone who has an opioid overdose and got Narcan and is waking up combative. Oh, shock. This next one is UBSIM. Now, the downside to UBSIM is that they don't have any EMS scenarios that I'm aware of. But if you talk to the company, they'll probably do it for you. They're a lot of companies. They're just eager to get out into different fields, and maybe they've even started some EMS scenarios. Sorry, that was a short one. What I like about UBSIM is that it's multiplayer, unlike VRpatient, which is single player. UBSIM is also multiplayer, like a catechist and SimX. The graphics are really good, and not only do they have nursing scenarios, but they have nursing skills, which is really important in a VR lab. Just looking at my watch here, checking. We got lots of time. I think it's good. We'll have lots of time for questions at the end. This one's interesting. This is called PCS Spark, and it's mostly nursing focused, but you can easily create EMS scenarios. It's a communication simulator, and you've got very limited agency in it, but it's really about talking to the patient. It's about talking with them, gathering a history, asking about their current their chief complaint and the OPQRST around that, plus asking about their medical history, meds, and allergies. And it's a pretty natural conversation. I find it quite remarkable. So, for example, there's Nicole, who is in the hospital, and she has a headache. And I'll say, "Hi, Nicole, my name is Rob. I'm a paramedic student. I understand you have a headache." And she'll say, "Yeah, it's pretty bad." And I'll ask, "How long have you had the headache?" "Oh, I've had it about 3 to 4 weeks." "Is it worse today?" "It's not worse, it just won't go away." And I'll ask her to describe, where's the headache, what does it feel like, does it go anywhere, then I'll ask about medical history, meds and allergies, etc. I can look at her chart, and she looks agitated. She looks irritated, anxious. So, I can say to her, I know you're anxious to get treatment. I just have to ask you a few more questions before we can get that, but we'll get you treated as soon as possible. And yeah, so the voice recognition is really quite effective. And occasionally, if you ask a question that she doesn't understand, she'll just say, I don't understand, which is what happens in real life, right? Even when you're talking with people whose first language is English, sometimes they don't understand. What I found interesting was I had a whole bunch of nursing faculty try this experience, only because we have more nursing faculty than paramedic faculty here at the college. And it's interesting to see how different people communicate. Some people are kind of to the point, and paramedics tend to be to the point because we're always on under the microscope to minimize our time on scene. But some of the nursing faculty, some of them just started having a conversation, like, I don't know, tell me about this or tell me about that. And sometimes the AI won't understand. It will just say, I don't understand. And that gets them back on track, which is good because that's what should happen in real life. And at the end, it gives you a transcript of everything the student said and everything the AI said. And although it's not nuanced enough to pick up on compassion and reassurance, you can see it in the transcript. Now, you could also do a video recording of this, but you can see it in the transcript, how the student interacted with the client, which is super cool. It takes about a year to create a single scenario because you have to train the artificial intelligence. And as you know, if you've ever used voice to text on your phone, artificial intelligence is not terribly intelligent. And the algorithms are not very sophisticated. So you have to train, you have to ask questions in multiple ways, and eventually, and in fact, as you continue to use it, it continues to get better, which is quite remarkable. And it is going to get better. We just on a skills level, I can come back to some of the stuff we're using. Just on a skills level, I thought this was a really interesting and pretty compelling study. This was a small cohort study, so take from that what you will. This was second-year medical students who, of course, have no surgical training, and they were randomized to either to do a surgical procedure, which involved putting a pin in the tibia. They were randomized to either standard training, which involved lectures, videos, reading, or virtual reality training. And they found that the percent of steps done correctly in virtual reality versus standard training was 63% versus 25%. And the knowledge retention of the surgical equipment in the VR group was 50% versus 11% in the standard group. So there's some really interesting research coming out, but there's still a paucity of research and lots of low-hanging fruit in that area, opportunities to do some research. There was another image I wanted to show you, but it's not here. We use a product called Health Scholars and Advanced Cardiac Life Support, and it uses voice recognition and artificial intelligence, much like PCS Spark, only you are in a room and there's a bunch of avatars, paramedic avatars, surrounding this patient who's in cardiac arrest. And you basically tell the avatars what to do. Each avatar has a name tag, excuse me, not COVID. And you just tell the avatars what to do. So you'll say, for example, Aaron, can you check for a pulse? Phil, can you start chest compressions? Fatima, can you defibrillate and then start an intravenous line? Ross, can you give a milligram of epinephrine? And not only can you command the avatars and tell them what to do, but it tests your situational awareness. So at some point, the person doing chest compressions may slow down, as funny enough happens in real life. And so you have to prompt them to speed up or swap them out for someone who's not tired. And the person who's ventilating, as you know, the person who's ventilating tends to tune out, and they may be hyper or hypoventilating the patient. You have to keep an eye on them. So it's a really good tool for sort of higher level EMS providers, typically EMTP level, who are, sort of reaching their capstone training to evaluate their critical thinking skills, their decision-making skills, their leadership skills, and their situational awareness. And the analytics provides you with written feedback on what was done, the sequence in which it was done. And I met an ER doc by the name of Tim Kobold in Columbia, Missouri, and he runs the simulation lab for the ER residents, or ED residents, maybe you call it ED in the US. He's doing an RCT where he's randomized residents to a mannequin simulation only versus mannequin simulation supplemented by VR to see if there's a difference in performance. We're looking at replicating the same study with our advanced care paramedic students, so super cool. So I've shown you some examples of simulation platforms, and I think, you know, simulation in VR is not intended to replace your lab work or your hospital clinical, but it's intended to supplement it. And if at some point it replaces a day or two here in lab, you know, we'll see, right? But it's experiential, it's contextual, it's spatial, it's immersive, and I think it's really powerful. I mean, the first time I experienced virtual reality patient simulation, two things really struck me when I came out of there. One, you know, I could see the patient struggling to breathe. I could see the cyanosis on his lips. I could see his chest heaving. When I asked him questions, he could only speak 4, 5, 6 words between breaths. And I could walk over to his night table to pick his medication. I could check a pulse. I could listen to his chest and identify that he had wheezes or crackles or something. And at the end of it, the two things that really struck me was, one, I get the same little twinge of adrenaline you get when you encounter someone who's very sick and you think, I need to assess and treat this person before they get worse. And two, the context was incredible. Being in the room with him, as opposed to looking at him through a 2D screen, being in the room with him and being able to walk right up to him, walk around him, was incredibly powerful. It was a wow moment. And I've heard people say, you know, VR is just a wow thing. Well, you can't discount the wow. The wow is part of the experience, right? If, you know, looking after someone on the side of the road with cars whizzing by and wondering if your car is going to drive right into you is very different from being in the lab and doing a simulation and the instructor telling you, oh, imagine there are cars going by and, you know, you might want to move further off in the shoulder. It's like, yeah, right. I just can't picture that in my mind. So it's pretty incredible. And so finally, where's all this going? Well, we're going to continue to see lots of simulation applications, and more of them are going to pop up, and hopefully they're going to get cheaper. I'm hoping that every single company will have at least 1 or 2 free samples that you can play with. But in the metaverse, I'm hoping there'll be like an EMS hub where you can, you know, you have a collection of free samples of simulations that you can play with. But the metaverse for EMS, in my mind, is going to be a place for your peer learning network, for you know, communicating with EMS providers and instructors and students from all over the globe and learning from everyone on the globe. I typically speak at one EMS conference a year in the US, and every time I go out there, I try to arrange to do a ride with the land crew or flight crew when I was working air ambulance. And the things that I've learned from crews in different cities across the United States has been incredible. And this will now be able to happen in 3D in the internet. To me, that's pretty darn exciting. So with that, I want to say thank you and take questions. I think we got a fair bit of time left here to take questions, which is great. If you're a Twitter fan, my Twitter handle is, I have 2 of them, but my sort of educational technology one is @edtechmedic. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and take some questions.
All right, it looks like we have one question in the chat from Stephen Dorfman. These different programs are awesome. What is the average cost of an EMS program? Thank you.
Yeah, good question. They all have slightly different pricing models, and they've constantly evolved over time. SimX, for example, we were paying about $100 per student per year. Now they have a model that's $5,000 per headset per year. So the presumption is that you're going to be using SimX in a lab and in a space. Interesting, you know, with SimX and nursing. There's room scale, and most people in the VR industry, when they say room scale, they mean 8 by 8 feet or 10 by 10 feet. But then there's room scale with capital letters. And with SimX, you can't teleport anywhere, at least not yet. So you have to walk. And so their room scale is like 15 by 20 foot hospital room, and you have to walk around the bed. Funny thing about virtual reality too, the illusion that happens. Most people will not walk through the bed, even though they can. They walk around the bed, which is really quite incredible. And I think you want to continue to walk around the bed because you don't want to diminish the illusion of being there, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so yeah, one is $5,000 per headset per year, and typically there are only 2 students in the headset, and the other students look at it on the big screen. One is, I think UBSim is somewhere around $120 per student per year. VRpatients, I'm not sure what the pricing is, but I want to say 80. It's quite reasonable. So they're all very different, and best thing to do is to connect with those websites and talk to the people directly in the company.
Robert Ackerman asks, are most of these programs PCVR or native? And do you need high-powered gaming computer to run these sim programs?
Yeah, most of them work on standalone VR headsets now, don't require a gaming computer. I didn't mention Oxford Medical Simulation because although they're one of the big players, they're pretty adamant about sticking with PCVR, and they use drop-down less, and so I'm not a fan of the company. They just don't seem to be flexible about changing. But some of these companies, like Acadicus, has migrated from PCVR to standalone VR. And PCVR is fine for a lab, right? You can afford a few gaming computers and a few headsets there. But if you want students to be able to learn it from a distance, you need to migrate to a standalone headset. So SimX migrated to standalone VR. I think Acadicus did as well, and I think UBSim did the same thing as well, which is really good. And of course, the standalone headsets are getting faster processing and diminished latency and greater power and graphics, and so it just keeps getting better and better and better. The nice thing about standalone VR headsets is you can also tether them to a PC if you want to get something higher end.
Stacy asks if you have an email address that we can reach out to with any questions.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just type it in here. And you can always look up my name in LinkedIn. Connect with me there.
Aaron Thomas asks, how do these programs stay current with changes in practice or adapt to regional protocols?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So VRpatients is what I like about it is at the back end, you can create your own scenarios, so you can adjust it to local protocols. Whereas a lot of them have sort of standardized patients, like SimX, you can modify scenarios, but there's a cost attached to it and time involved, and you have to work with the company to do that. And so yeah, EMS is kind of a unique area, right? Because of local protocols, local medical directives are very different. So that's a really important consideration when you're selecting a tool is does it have standard patients, which are not likely to change? And like, for example, SimX will have ACLS type scenarios and they'll follow AHA guidelines and that'll be current. But for everything else, it's not cardiac arrest or dysrhythmia management. You're going to need some flexibility, excuse me, around that. So yeah, it's a big consideration when you're looking for a VR application.
Alex Miller asks, what internet speed is needed to run the program?
Yeah, good question. Hang on a split second here. I'm just putting my LinkedIn thing in the chat here. It's my LinkedIn connection. So yeah, the same kind of internet connection you would need to run to do an online course with a laptop. So synchronous online course, like a video chat, like we're doing right now. It's about the same. You do need an internet connection, and you do need an alternative too, because some people don't tolerate the headset and need to access by PC. So yeah, I mean, as VR headsets get better and better, some companies will actually load the entire program onto a VR headset if it's going to be a solo experience. If it's going to be a multiplayer experience, obviously you have to have an internet connection so you can connect with other people. But if it's learning procedures and it's a solo and it can be loaded on the headset, that's another option with these companies. But that's definitely one of the many considerations when you're looking at applications. Any other questions? So I'm a big believer in peer networks. Paulo Coelho once said, sometimes you have to travel a great distance to find what is near. And when it comes to educational technology, whether you're teaching synchronously online or doing podcasting or screencasting or interactive screencasting or any ed tech, sometimes you search and search and search, and then you just happen to meet someone who says, oh yeah, try this, and just like, why didn't I find this sooner? Yeah, if you want to connect with me, have a conversation, learn about stuff, I can also share. Actually, let me share it with you. I've been curating two things. One is a list of VR applications. Now, this is these. Oops, hang on a second here. These are applications across multiple programs, so not all are patient care related, but oops, second here, copy the link, done. So this is my list of virtual reality applications. There's a lot of medical simulation on there. The other thing I have is I've been curating a literature search on current research for virtual reality. So I'll share this list with you as well. Here's the evidence stuff. And yeah, there you go. Any other questions, comments? Just curious, is anyone doing VR in a lab currently or exploring it? Just pop a yes or a no in the chat. Yeah, expenses still too high. Yeah, especially if you have small numbers of students, for sure. But what I would say to all of you is if you can afford a headset, like a Quest headset, I think is $299. If you can afford it, you get one, you can start to explore VR, just reach out to me and we can meet in virtual reality and chat, have a further conversation in VR. I also teach VR educator micro-credential. The next one is going to be in October. It's 6 weeks, mostly asynchronous, about 3 hours a week. We meet live online once a week. 4 of those meetings are in virtual reality on social VR platforms. And it's a lot of fun. Yeah, internet connection is a problem, especially in rural and remote areas. It's funny, we have a mandate to make in Canada to make high-speed internet available to everyone by 2025, but we don't have enough tradespeople to dig trenches for for high-speed internet, which is interesting. I learned this at a meeting about a month ago, and they're paying like $25 an hour to people just to dig holes. Four megabits per second. Oh, I feel your pain. Youch. I've got about 25 at my house and about 100 here at the college. Yep, 4 is painful. You could grow old waiting for something to download with 4 megabits per second. All right, well, I think we're able to give you back 8 minutes of your life, unless anyone has any additional comments or questions.
Rob, thank you so much for presenting. I will make sure that all of the resources that you shared here today with everyone, I'll make sure those go out in the follow-up email tomorrow. So that way everybody has access to those, as well as your LinkedIn and your Twitter and your email.
Yeah.
Everyone, I put the link to access the CEU in the chat, but if you missed that here today, that will be in tomorrow's follow-up email as well. And this webinar will be on YouTube shortly.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you everyone. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.